Okay. Can you all move forward as well and take a seat? Okay. I'll just fill in the count. I'll repeat the announcements. So just want to repeat those announcements to you in case you didn't hear the first time. So tonight there is a joint Messiah program at 404 with the 404 Youth Committee and Muharram Youth Foundation. That will comprise of speakers including Sheikh, Jaffer, Ladak, Sheikh Abbas Panju and Nabil Awan, and there will also be Matam afterwards. In terms of tomorrow, we don't have an English Maktal program here tomorrow, but we encourage you to attend the various centres across Manchester. At Dar al-Hadi at 10 a.m., Sayyid Hassan Tabatabai from America will be reciting the English Maktal at Dar al-Hadi. And then at 1:30 p.m. in the afternoon at 404, there will be English Maktal recited by Sheikh Abbas Panju. So we encourage you to attend those centres. Tomorrow evening we will have our Sham-e Ghariba Majlis. That will start promptly after Maghrib Jamaat. So we encourage you to attend on time. So the Jamaat will start around 7:30 p.m. and we'll have the Majlis straight after. So please attend on time. Could I just ask if the sisters could also move across towards this side of the room? There's plenty of gap towards there in that side. Just so it will make it easier for the sisters that attend later on. We also have a 2-night special Majlis program this coming Sunday and Monday. That will be Sheikh Jihad Ismail, who will be reciting for 2 nights. We'll start at 6:30 p.m. on that Sunday and Monday. We'll start with a Q&A session, followed by Maghrib and the lecture. And we'll have Sayyid Ali Hakim reciting Matam on the 2nd night. So we are now ready to start the Majlis, so please welcome Sheikh with a loud salawat. Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.
Salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli. For all of our marhumin, if we can recite a Surah Al-Fatiha. For Her Eminence Lady Zainab al-Kubra, Salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. For His Eminence Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, Salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And for the awaited Saviour of humanity and the hastening of His appearance, Imam al-Mahdi, Ajjalallahu ta'ala Faraj al-Sharif. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على Awaited Saviour of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا أبي عبد الله الحسين صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. Welcome to our last night in our series of discussions looking at the rise and fall of civilizations and the challenges and responses that you and I may have to both Muslim and Western modernity. To recap, we have been speaking about how the Quran describes the various conclusions, the various outcomes of civilizations, both in the negative and positive sense. In the positive sense, the verse of Quran that we just recited in our Arabic khutbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the most positive outcome of any given society, community, civilization. To which he says, "Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat lin-nas," that you could be the best of societies heralded for mankind. The condition of which would be ta'maruna bil ma'ruf wa tanhawna 'anil munkar, that you would call towards goodness and you would forbid evil. If this was to occur, if as a society collectively together, this would be an underlying, an assumption, an underscoring part of the way in which your society was built upon, this would ensure that you would be a society heralded for mankind. And we've been looking at multiple discussions. We've been talking in the last few nights, for example, last night we spoke about nuclear weapons and the military-industrial complex and showed how that is a downfall or potential downfall of our civilization. The night before we spoke, for example, about the issue of global warming and climate change and how maybe only after 30 years from now, 50 years from now, parts of our planet will become uninhabitable. We've spoken about, for example, the way our society has moved into a post-truth society, the way in which our society no longer considers truth and accuracy and honesty to be a social currency between us. All of these are reasons and means for a society to break down. Our last discussion tonight, inshallah, will focus on the hacking of the mind and the manipulation of individuals and society at large for the purposes of either corporation or government to make you be a puppet, act as they wish you to be able to act. And we will focus on certain elements of neurology. We will try to understand advertising techniques, how susceptible we are as human beings to end up becoming addicted to these advertisements, to understand the way in which we respond to these corporations and how easy it is for our minds to end up being hacked and controlled. In order to do this, inshallah, tonight, we will firstly look at the society of the Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, and look back into the Quran and see whether that society's minds were hacked and controlled, how that happened, and then inshallah we will look today at specifically how corporations understand the psychology of people, especially two demographics, children and parents, and then from there we'll be able to understand the way in which often our communities can be groomed to thinking and practicing anything that we are told to think through. Tonight, inshallah, is also the night of Ashura. For all of us, tomorrow will be commemorating the martyrdom anniversary of Aba Abdullah al-Husayn, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And it is necessary that we just remind ourselves tomorrow is a day of grief. We are recommended to not put dunya ahead of that grief about our work, and to be able to ensure that our day is spent in servitude of that great event which saved Islam, which saved humanity at large. And so even from tonight, inshallah, many people will ensure that their grief and azar maximizes from tonight. And inshallah, before we go into the maqtal of Ali al-Asghar, we will speak about some etiquettes and reflection points for tonight and tomorrow. We have been speaking each night from the Quran and from the example of the Holy Prophet, so that from that we can juxtapose the challenges of our time and look at the relationship between how the prophetic era was, and the way in which many of those challenges arise in our own context for today. The verse I wish to start with to show you, inshallah, is considered to be the mission statement of the Holy Prophet of Islam. Now you can imagine when 23 years of prophethood and 63 years of life are going to be condensed into one verse. The magnanimity of that verse, how deep and splendorous that verse must be, in order to explain what this grand man was created for within the framework of one verse altogether. This is that verse that speaks about the mission statement of the Holy Prophet of Islam. We've spoken about other verses that contribute to that mission. For example, yesterday, and we're going to speak about this again later on, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, هُوَ الَّذِي بَعَثَ فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. Allah, He is the one who has raised a messenger from amongst themselves. His purpose to do what? To teach them the ayat, the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be able to purify them and to teach them the book. The order of this verse is very important, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't state you will be taught the book first and then you will be purified. Nay, you need to be purified and then you can understand the Quran. That is the order. So here the mission of the Prophet would first be to purify themselves. And yesterday we spoke about how this manifested itself, where the Arab society was a war-based society. It had the disease of perpetual wars between tribes, between faiths, between pagans. And before the Prophet could get them to live properly as human beings, he needed to purify them from the hatreds that they had between each other. This verse is the centrality of the mission statement of the Holy Prophet of Islam and describes and defines the way the Prophet acted in Mecca and the way in which he acted in Medina. Let's have a look at this verse together, inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. الذين يتبعون الرسول النبي الأمي الذي يجدونه مكتوبا عندهم في التوراة والإنجيل. Those who follow the messenger, meaning us. Inshallah, we are considered to be amongst those who follow the Holy Prophet of Islam. Those who follow the messenger, the unlettered prophet, whom they find written in what they have in the books before them, the Torah and the Injil. What should the prophet do? What's the mission of the prophet? How does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describe and define what the prophetic mission is? يَأْمُرُهُمْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَاهُمْ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. Now earlier on we stated that to be the best of nations, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ, for you to be the best of communities heralded for mankind, the conditions are two. تَأْمَرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. Here the mission statement of the Prophet begins by saying that the Prophet will do what to those people who follow him? يَأْمُرُهُمْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَاهُمْ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. Now this tells us from the very outset that again, this is the standard, this is the baseline. These are the foundational bricks of the prophetic mission, the prophetic movement, which would be to ensure that he calls towards good and forbids evil. وَيُحِلُّ لَهُمُ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَيُحَرِّمُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْخَبَائِثِ. After the Prophet is to call towards good and forbid the evil, he should make lawful for them the good things and prohibit from them the evil things. Now someone will say, yeah, duh. I mean, surely the good things are supposed to be halal for me, and surely the evil things are supposed to be prohibited for me. Why would the Prophet have to do that? Why would that be so elementary within his mission statement? Because the Arabs at that time lived in the complete opposite. They would prohibit the good and they would allow and encourage the evil. The society was opposite. And as a result, the Prophet had to come in, switch the way in which they were living. The normalities had to be changed. It continues. وَيَذَعُ عَنْهُمْ إِسْرَهُمْ وَأَغْلَالَ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ. This is so important. This is the peak of the verse. This is the crescendo of the mission of the Prophet. And you and I can judge whether our Islam is proper Islam or cultural Islam by virtue of these parts of the verse. What is the Prophet meant to do? وَيَذَعُ عَنْهُمْ إِسْرَهُمْ وَأَغْلَالَ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ. That the Prophet is supposed to relieve them, lift from them the burdens from their shoulders, and he is supposed to break the shackles that were upon them. The way in which these communities were living was that they prohibited the halal and they encouraged the haram. And they were people whose society and the way in which they interpreted their religions was that their religions became burdensome for them. And the way in which their cultures and societies were, they were shackling, stifling, debilitating, immoral societies. The Prophet had the primary mission to break their shackles, to liberate them from the practices that they had, so that they could grow as individuals and grow as collective societies altogether. If you cannot break those shackles, then there is no point in coming later and giving you the Quran, giving you the Salah, giving you the Sawm. Because all of these things they already had with them. They already knew they were supposed to pray. They already knew they were supposed to go on pilgrimage. They already knew they were supposed to be chivalrous people. But they used all of these things and turned them on their head such that, for example, instead of praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would pray to idols. Instead of going on Hajj the way in which Ibrahim alayhi salam did, they would go on Hajj naked, singing, clapping and dancing. Instead of being chivalrous and heroic, they would have continuous wars amongst each other in order to pillage whatever resources that they had. Everything had turned on its head. All the principles that they had been turned on its head. And so the Prophet had to start with them by calling them towards good, helping them forbid the evil, and then he had to ensure that they learned that their good things were halal for them, the haram was prohibited, and then he had to lift the burdens and break the shackles. Now here, this is important as a general understanding of what the Prophet had to do. And of course, as we stated, you and I can immediately tell whether our religion that we are practicing, our Islam, our Shiism, our humanity, is actually in accordance with those things. Do they add to the burdens or do they lift the burdens? Do our practices when we come here break the shackles that we have created upon ourselves, or do they liberate us or not? Immediately you will know in your heart of hearts whether those practices add on veils of darkness or whether they truly liberate us from veils of darkness. Now here, having understood that this was the principle of what the Holy Prophet of Islam had to do, he had to liberate the mind. He had to purify them so that they were ready to act as free human beings. You can imagine how well he did, how he managed to move that society from burying their daughters alive to considering women to be what they ought to be, from fighting each other as religions and sects and tribes to managing to bring people together to live in a harmonious society. The Prophet took them from down here to up here within 23 years. Fast forward only 60 years later, as an example, on the battlefield of Karbala. And think about the statement of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. To which he says to them, O army of Abu Sufyan, not army of Yazid, not army of Muawiyah, O army of Abu Sufyan. He addresses them this way. I pose a question. Why does Hussein ibn Ali not address them as O army of Yazid? Are they not the army of Yazid? Yes? So why address them as, O army of Abu Sufyan? What do you think? Why address them as the army of Abu Sufyan? Yes? What else do you think? Why else address them this way? Correct. Why else address them this way and say, you are the army of Abu Sufyan, as opposed to say to them, you are the army of Yazid? Say again? Right, he's the source of the evil. Which means that these armies are actually acting on behalf of whom in reality? They're really doing the bidding of whom? Abu Sufyan. What Abu Sufyan started 60 years ago against the Holy Prophet of Islam, what Muawiyah continued against Ali ibn Abi Talib, on the 10th of Muharram, Yazid is continuing against Hussein ibn Ali, which was what? To destroy Islam altogether, because of their envy and jealousy of Banu Hashim. So this army didn't realize it, but they're actually doing the bidding of what happened and what started 6 decades before. Imagine, just think about this for a second. The Prophet comes to break you from your shackles, the things that hold you back. And here you can see the problem, that minds can so easily be hacked. People can be convinced to do anything that they don't realize, such that when they killed the grandson of Rasulullah, their own prophet and messenger, they thought they were acting for themselves. But actually they were doing the bidding of what started 6 decades before. Can you see how easily the human being can be manipulated into acting in any way? I've asked this question before to this crowd on a previous night and even elsewhere before. Think about this very carefully. If you lived prior to the announcement of the Holy Prophet of Islam, and you just had a beautiful baby daughter, can you imagine what it would be like to have to take your own daughter out of your house and into the desert and bury her alive? Can you imagine doing that? To see those beautiful arms that cry as you have to shovel the sand back over her. How many of you would do it? You will all say, by God, I will not do it. I will say to you, 99% of us would have done it. Would you have not? Be honest. If you were living in that society, it would just have been the norms. Because we would have just acted the way society told us to act. We would have just done whatever society told us to do. The vast majority of us. It's a very hard thing to admit. But there was only a handful of those in Mecca that wouldn't do that. What makes us think, what makes me think that I would be the one to be amongst those handful of people that would actually use my own intelligence and think, hang on a minute, what I'm doing is so wrong. Now here, the Prophet had to liberate them from these practices. And here we can state that Hussein ibn Ali is reminding them that they're not thinking for themselves, that they're actually doing the bidding of someone else. At least be free human beings, he says. O army of Abi Sufyan, if you don't believe in God and you don't fear the day of judgment, then at least be free human beings. Don't kill me for the ransom which will end up being nothing in dunya and in akhirah. Can you see? That even from the time of the Prophet, the mission was to liberate people from just being pawns at the hands of others. At the time of Karbala, the centrality of the message was, liberate yourselves, be human beings, be free people. Hussein himself comes out onto the battlefield, salamullahi alayhi, and he says, do you not know that I am the grandson of Rasulullah? They said, yes we do. Do you not know that my uncle is Hamza? They said, yes we do. Do you not know that my uncle is Jaffer, the one who flies in heavens with wings? They said, yes we do. Do you not know that my grandmother is Khadijat al-Kubra? Yes we do. Do you not know that my mother is Fatima al-Zahra? Yes we do. Then why are you killing me? Because you are the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib. We kill you because we have been instilled with hatred for someone else. We can't think for ourselves. We're robots to the mission of Banu Umayyah and nothing else other than it. The mind can easily be hacked. The mind can easily be manipulated. People can be made to do whatever unless we become free, unless we learn to become objective, unless we learn to live as human beings ought to live. Now, if you look back at these slides, you will see that the way in which people were at that time was that they practically tried to enslave people to act within an economic system, within a political system, within a framework of thinking. As you'll know, that time, there were a multitude of gods. And famously, we read in the books of history that there were 365 idols inside the holy Kaaba. And each tribe had their own idol. And each of these idols had a name, and they would be ascribed a practice of divinity. One type of idol would be a god for war, a god for rizq, a god to have male children, and so on and so forth. And what would happen is that when you would need, you would go to that particular god from another tribe, and you would need to pay some sort of tribute. And when you lay that tribute to the god, then you could have your a'mal accepted by virtue of that idol. Idol would pray for you, or that idol would intercede for you. Of course, it's an idol, it can't do any of those things. Now imagine you're living in Mecca. Mecca has been built off the back of the Holy Kaaba and Zamzam, which is a life source in a land so barren that without it, there would be no way for you to be able to live in that area. Now, despite all of this, you knowing that your history, the history of your own city was such that it was built of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, the rituals that you were doing every year for Hajj go back to Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam and all of that. When the Prophet came, the elite of Mecca needed to ensure that the practice of liberation would not reach the masses and reach the people. Because the moment that they could think for themselves, the moment that they were free and understood the call of Rasulullah, then they would en masse turn against the Quraysh leadership and realize that it was a house of cards, that the entirety of the system that they had created was not to benefit the people of Quraysh, but to manipulate and exploit the people of Quraysh for the benefit of the leadership, the elite of the people of Quraysh. So every time the Prophet came, they would make up a statement. They would say, he is majnoon, he is taken over by the jinnat. He falsifies and makes up these stories, iktatabaha. He just writes and plagiarizes the books of old. And every excuse that they could use to badmouth and name the Prophet, they gave. But there was one type of excuse which is so intriguing, and again makes us think about how easily manipulated we are as human beings, and whether we just follow whatever leadership and society tells us, or whether we actually have the ability to think through what comes before us. Here, in chapter number 38, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals a verse. And just think about this question. Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala capture this verse for the whole of humanity, for the whole of history to tell us? He says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, أَجَعَلَ آلِهَةً إِلَهًا وَاحِدًا إِنَّ هَذَا لَشَيْءٌ عَجَابٌ. He has made the gods only one God? This man, Rasulullah, has seen all of our 365 gods, and he's making them into one God? Inna hadha la shay'un ajab. What a strange thing this is. How curious, how fantastic. What, we've never heard of such a thing. One God. Huh? Your entire city is based off the idea of one God. The history of Mecca where you live is based off the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, who was the ultimate monotheist. Yet, in order to obfuscate, in order to trick, in order to muddle the discourse, whenever Rasulullah would come and tell them, one God, One God, one God. Remember your histories. You are the one who live in a city on the basis of the Kaaba, which is the centrality of the physical universe for God. On top of this Kaaba sits the Arsh of Allah. They would respond in saying, أَجَعَلَ آلِهَةً إِلَهًا وَاحِدًا? Does this man make all of our gods into one God? إِنَّ هَذَا لَشَيْءٌ عَجَابٌ. What a strange thing this is. And everybody would believe it. People would go to war with Rasulullah, and the kids would believe it, and they would throw stones at Rasulullah, and they would throw feces at him, and they would torture his companions, even though the most obvious argument was before them. Look in your own city and its history. Here this shows us how easily people can be manipulated by just being spoken to, bombarded with a particular message. But it shows us how receptive we are to these multiple messages and how we can be turned and manipulated to act in any way, shape or form. For us to be able to discuss tonight, inshallah, I would like to talk to you about this in our own context and how this is the downfall of a society. Because when you and I can be manipulated by any content, by any sort of advertising, by any sloganeering, then the moment we become susceptible to that and don't have our guard up, whenever someone tells us anything, we will believe it and we will act in accordance with it. We spoke about this 3 or 4 nights ago when we spoke about the post-truth society. What did Nigel Farage do? Farage made one poster, just one poster for the Brexit debate. Breaking point. And it was just a picture of thousands of Syrian refugees fleeing a bombed area in their own city. And the imagery was so powerful enough for some people to make them fear this group of people coming over, such that they were able to vote in a way that would end up being the downfall of their own community, that would destroy their own economy, that would plunge them into a political crisis. But it's okay, because an image told me that some brown people are coming over. Can you see? If you can be that easily manipulated by a picture, God forbid tomorrow when worse happens. Big red bus, £350 million a week going back into the NHS. No, that's not what the UK Statistics Authority said. So you have the experts that are telling you it's lies, but a bus with some numbers on it must be true. What happens when your mind is so easily manipulated that you don't even need to ask the following question? Okay, Mr. Politician, Boris, when we leave, when the Brexit vote comes out, what happens next? Most people didn't even think about that question. They didn't even get that far. It was just in, out. Okay, fine. What happens when we go out? Even today we don't know. We still don't know what happens. Can you see how easily people are manipulated? We have to ensure that we do not become like that. And moreover, we have to ensure that we help liberate others from being like that. Because this is the start of the downfall of a society. When people can easily be manipulated, told what to do, and then end up acting in whichever way they are told to be able to think and act. And believe me, in history, that never ends well for any of us. So now, inshallah, I wish to be able to show you a couple of books and talk to you about some of the techniques hacking takes on, and then inshallah to be able to think out practically how that messaging bombards us and how we can learn from that type of messaging to ensure that we do not become manipulated human beings. We become free, liberated people who have broken the shackles that are placed upon us by society. Here, the first book I want to show you is a book by the name of Joel Bakan, by the name of The Corporation by the author Joel Bakan. Throughout this series, I've been presenting to you books, telling you about scholarly opinion, and I encourage all of you to read some of these books because they're giants within their fields of understanding. Bakken writes this book, The Corporation, The Pathological Pursuit of Profit and Power. Bakken's hypothesis and research is this: corporations are created for the one purpose and live and work under the framework for one purpose, which is solely to make money and to maximize profit. That's it. And then he goes on to prove in the book that legally it is responsible to maximize profit however it can for its shareholders, for its stockholders, for its various different directors. It has to maximize profit. And the only time it's not allowed to maximize profit is if it's going to make more profit off that. For example, we say corporate social responsibility. So it goes and does this, but it's only legally allowed to do that if it's going to make them more money elsewhere. And he has a whole book dedicated to the history and development and proving that this is what a corporation is supposed to do. I'll give you one story just for you to be able to appreciate the example of what he says. He gives an example. He gives a number of examples, but I'll give you one. And he talks about Nike. Nike is, of course, one of the most famous brands in the entire world. Now, the reason why I bring up Nike, and I'll tell you the story of what he writes in the book, is we all know right now in the United States of America, I hope many of you know, Nike partnered with whom? Colin Kaepernick. The idea was that Colin would not salute the American flag because of institutionalized racism, violence against young black male. And until the police stop the targeting of black male men, he will not stand and salute the flag. Now, after all these months and years of this debate going on, after all of these years of the debate going on, Nike, only 2 weeks back, decided to work with Kaepernick in order to make a video with him, an advertisement with him, and show that they were partnering with him in his stance against that type of racism and violence. In the United States of America, there's a big debate going on. Many people in the United States are now burning their night clothes. Have you seen some of these videos? Yeah? So they're now going on to YouTube, they're going on to Facebook, and they're burning their own Nike products in protest of Nike, because Nike worked with Colin Kaepernick in order to work with his strategy. It's not a surprise to you. You'll probably have known that sometimes they leave their shoes on when they burn their own shoes, and they end up having to go to hospital. This is what happens when you just close your aql off, that you can actually burn your own shoes whilst wearing them. Allahu Akbar. وَيَذَعُ عَنْهُمْ إِسْرَهُمْ وَأَغْلَالَ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ. The Prophet lifted the burdens of people's shoulders and broke the shackles from their intellect. 2018, people are burning their own shoes whilst they wear them still, going to hospital after it. So now, think about this. I'm going to pose a very simple question. Why did Nike do that? Do you think that the CEO, the marketing director, are on the side of Colin Kaepernick? Why did they do it? Money. Say again? Strategy. Basically, with all of their polling, all of their marketing research, they saw that the majority of Americans were on the side of Kaepernick, and that the next generation were going to buy Nike more likely if they worked with Kaepernick. Whereas the elder generation who don't even buy Nike, forgive me, they're all going to die out soon. I didn't mean to point specifically in that direction. Yeah? May Allah grant you all the longest of lives, inshallah. So now, based on that marketing research, the people who weren't buying Nike and protesting against Nike, they were going to go anyway. So why base your next 20 years of marketing strategy on those people? But the millennials, the next generation who are buying it, would support Nike. And so in opposition, yeah, maybe one person, 10 people, 1,000 people burnt their own feet, but you had 1 million people go out and buy something new from Nike. Do you really think Nike is on your side? Really? But many people believed it. Nike, I'll go out and buy Nike. They weren't with you in the first place. Why did it take them 2 years to get to that point? Now here, in this book, Bakken talks about Nike. And he tells this story where he himself goes to a country in South America in order to be able to observe a Nike facility where they stitch the clothes and then ship them across the world. This is in South America. So he says when he got to the address of that factory, you would expect there to be big advertising, right? Nike, just do it. Nothing. Just walled up, barbed wire, guards. Where's the advertising? Where's the big neon lights? It's not there. Now, of course, he wasn't allowed in, but he interviewed several workers from that factory and then writes his report in this book. And he says the following, that when I spoke to them, I would speak to women who would be employed by Nike to make the clothes and stitch the things that you and I end up wearing. He says the following. He says that those women were forced to work 14-hour days, that they were paid less than minimum wage, that they were not allowed breaks. They weren't even allowed to drink water, because if they drank water and needed to go to the bathroom, it would take away from their own time working. Think about that. You are lovers of Hussein ibn Ali, the one who was kept thirsty at least for a day, if not 3 days, according to some narrations. We weep over that people, the beloved granddaughters of Rasulullah, Fatima al-Sughra, Sukaina, Ruqayya, Sayyida Zainab, Sayyida Kulthum, were kept thirsty. Here in Nike, in the factories, they do not give water breaks to its workers, lest that they have to take bathroom breaks, which would cut from their time. But hey, let's go and buy Nike. Let's cry for Hussein ibn Ali. Let's cry for these grandchildren, and then basically empower the people that are being Yazid today to women. Not only this, listen to this. This is important. You understand what's going on in front of your eyes. Not only this, he says in his interview, the women who worked in those factories testified and recorded that if they fell pregnant, they were immediately fired on the spot. Because if they were pregnant, then they have different rights. Then they are able to go, have to leave work, come back. They may slow down their work, and Nike wouldn't allow that. So they were fired on the spot, South America. So they would lose their jobs. Now, if you understand this, he's pointing to that the corporation's purpose is to maximize profit. It doesn't care for you. It doesn't care for the environment. It doesn't care whether you spend your money on them or not, whether you lose, whether you go bankrupt on them or not. So long as you buy their product, that's what they are out to achieve. And they will compromise safety, they will compromise human rights in order to be able to achieve that end goal. Now, having understood that this is what Bakken says, and he prefaces his book on the pathological pursuit of power and profit, he then goes on to show how we become manipulated by these different corporations and the way in which they have understood psychology in order to manipulate kids and adults. Now, for example, he talks about this in a number of different ways, and I'm going to introduce a different book, and again, I'm going to recommend it to everyone, inshallah, which is called The Hacking of the American Mind. And again, in this book, it goes through the science behind the corporate takeover, and again tries to understand the way in which these corporations use child psychologists, use advertising to be able to manipulate people. Now, to be able to explain what happens and the way in which this works, the first thing is that we think about our needs and then we are advertised to. There are two ways. We have things that give us pleasure and we have things that give us contentment. These are two different things. And in fact, the mind, the brain, has two different areas for things that give you pleasure and things that give you contentment. Pleasure, for example, is that thing which comes to you immediately and lasts for half an hour, 1 hour. Contentment is that thing which lasts for years, can be lifelong. So for example, when we do a sin, is that contentment or pleasure? Gives us a pleasure. We've done the thing. It flees after that. But contentment lasts a lifetime. When you finished your degree, when you get married, when you have a child. These aren't pleasures that last for an hour. These are contentments that last forever. The way in which manipulation works is that it understands the mind and it tries to ensure that it targets pleasure. And then we end up mixing the two up. When I buy this thing, I'll be content. No. It's going after your pleasure, which is very, very short-lived. And the more it goes after your pleasure, the more you buy into it, the more addicted you become to that pleasure, and eventually the cycle comes where you are now at the behest and control of that particular pleasure. That's the way advertising works. Bakken talks about it very specifically, and I want to talk to especially my young brothers and sisters. And he says that child psychologists have worked out the way in which to target children to ensure that they can get their parents to buy them whatever they want. Now all the parents' ears are pricked up. Huh? Toys R Us closed down recently, right? Otherwise, everybody will be heading there on Friday. Now, think about this. The child psychologists are paid to be able to teach the marketing companies how to target parents and how to target kids, to manipulate them. Think about it immediately. Nike, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, everything, all the brands. And to what extent are you and I as individuals in control of our needs, our desires, or whether there's that monkey on my back jumping going, have that burger, have that burger, have that burger, have that burger, have that drink, whether we are in control or whether we're not in control. What happens when we see the billboard, when we see the advert? Children, according to Bakken, are the most targeted. Why? Because they are tomorrow's consumers. If you can get them hooked onto a brand early on in their life, likelihood they will never break from it thereafter. So they have to be bombarded. They don't have any money themselves, sadly. So they have to go and ask their parents to buy for them. But in order to do that, they themselves need to be hooked in. Kids here see somewhere in the region of 30,000 adverts per year. Think about that. What type of adverts are there? Yeah, there's toys. Yeah, there's games. But there are other types of adverts as well, aren't there? Which are less decent. The shampoo ads and the Dove ads and whatever else. The kids see them all. The kids see the horror ones. The kids see the dirty ones. The kids see the manipulative ones. They see all of it and they're imbibing it. Collate that. The average child sees 30,000 adverts per year. Imagine the extent to which they are being manipulated. Imagine to the extent that they change their understanding of the world over that period of time of 1 year, when you bombard them with this messaging. Imagine if you took that away from them. Imagine that they weren't exposed to all of those adverts. How would they be in terms of their thinking? Just think about that for a second. Now, Bakken talks about that the child psychologists have created 2 types of nagging. There's 2 types of nagging that children do when they see these adverts. So they run to their parents and they say, I want a Barbie dollhouse. I want a Ken, right? There's 2 types of nagging. There's a nagging which is whining. I want, where? And then there's the type of nagging, which is the type of nagging for something when they say that there's a reason behind what they want. Because I want Barbie and Ken, so then they can get married and then they can go on holiday together. Yeah? So there's the nag, wah, 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 and then there's the because. I want this game because it will make me cool. Everybody else is having it. Everyone else is doing it, so I want it. There's the because. Two types of nag. Wah, 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 or because. Now, based upon this, child psychologists have also worked out that there's 4 types of parents. And so they make the type of advert targeting to the child, knowing that there's 4 categories of parents, so that the child goes back to the parent and gets them to buy for them in a particular way. Hands up, how many of you are parents here? Right up, come on. Now this is going to interest you, huh? Let's see which one, if not none, inshallah none. You don't have to fall into one of these categories. Let's see which one of these 4 categories Bakken puts out there. And actually it's child psychologists. He references, of course, all of this stuff. Now, the first type of parent, so you're being whined to, or you're being told, I need this because. The first type of parent is known as the bare necessities parent. They're affluent and they're unresponsive to their child. And so before they're going to buy their child something, they need a reason to buy that thing for their child. What category does that go into? Whiny or because? Because. So now the type of advert will tell the child, you need this game because if you don't have it on Christmas Day, when you will call your friends, you will be the one left out. So then they run to their parent, I need this because. This is the first type of parent. The second, third, and fourth type of parent is in the whiny side. They succumb to the whiny type of child that's being manipulated, and the parent becomes manipulated. The first is kids' pals. Those parents that want to live vicariously through their own children. I never made it as a professional footballer, therefore my child has to make it as a professional footballer. I never managed to become a Hollywood celebrity. I'm going to make my child a Hollywood celebrity. Kids' pals. Basically, when they buy their child that monster truck, it's not really for their child. When the child goes off to school, they want to play with it. Yeah, so that's the second type. So what happens? They're very responsive to the child's whining. Wow, 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 I want this, I want this, I want this. Really, it's for them. And they're doing it and they're buying it for themselves as much as they're buying it for their child. Second type of whiny or parent that responds to a whiny type of child being targeted by advertisers is the indulger. The indulger is generally the working mum who wants to ease, working mum or dad, who wants to ease their guilt for not spending time with their child. So rather than spend time with their child, you just buy them what they want, and then you don't have to spend any child time with them. You basically just allow the internet or the PlayStation to help them grow up. You understand? That's the third type. You're an indulger, where you'll buy whatever they want because you don't spend any time with them. The last type of parent is the conflicted type of parent, who's usually the single parent who buys impulse buys because they are finding that these things are an assistance to them in their parenting. So they will hear that the child nags and whines, but they will say, yeah, I'll buy this product because it will help me as being a parent. I will buy this thing and it helps me being an assistant to buying for them. Bakken shows that we're being bombarded, we're being targeted, we're not making to think decisions for ourselves, and as a result, because of all of these imageries, because of all of these different sounds, all of these different words, we end up thinking other than what we are. We end up acting in accordance with what someone else wants us to think. I have a video to show you before we move towards our conclusion, inshallah. And this video is very interesting. And it came on a couple of years ago at the Super Bowl. And I think many people must know what the Super Bowl is. It's considered to be, in the United States of America, the cost of advertising during the Super Bowl is the most expensive advertising anywhere in the world because it is going to get the most number of views. So now I want to show you what happened a couple of years ago in the Super Bowl. Hang on, inshallah, we'll play it in a second. And basically, what they're going to do is they're going to take an excerpt from Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. The I Have a Dream speech is one of the most famous, riveting, inspirational speeches of all time. And they're going to use it to sell you something. And I want to show you the sound. I want you to pay attention to the imagery and to the words and how these three things come together. And what is it that they are selling you at the end of it?
If you want to be important, wonderful. If you want to be recognized, wonderful. If you want to be great, wonderful. But recognize that he who is greatest among you shall be your servant. That's a new definition of greatness. By giving that definition of greatness, it means that everybody can be great. You don't have to know about Plato and Aristotle to serve. You don't have to know the theory of relativity to serve. You don't have to know the second theory of thermodynamics in physics to serve. You only need a heart full of grace. Soul generated by love.
What's being sold? A car. And what was played to you in front of your eyes? There was 30 seconds of an inspirational speech. You don't have to be Aristotle. You don't have to be Einstein. It's about love. And the imagery. What kind of imagery were you shown? Contentment. What else? What specific things were you shown? Can anyone remember the pictures? Hard work. Hard work? This also means that tomorrow in the day, we should come in a state of mourning and grief, overcome by the grief of what Hussein ibn Ali had to endure tomorrow. It also Ashura, then you have to represent Hussein ibn Ali in the way in which he deserves to be represented. From the 7th of Muharram, the water supply had been cut off to the family and to the companions of Hussein ibn Ali. This means that for 3 days, the children did not have water, and that they would be crying out, Al-Atash, Al-Atash, Al-Atash. The thirst is killing us. The thirst is overcoming us. Each time the children had gone to a family member in order to get water, none of them had come back alive. Before, Sakina had gone towards her uncle Abbas and said, "Oh Abbas, the thirst is killing me." Abbas had gone to the banks of the river Euphrates, but he had not come back. How now do you as the children go towards your father and say, "Father, we are thirsty," knowing that every time one of your family members go, their bodies come back in pieces, with arrows in their body, with spears in their body, with swords cut off part of their body? How then do you go towards your father Hussein and ask him for water? But Hussein hears their crying, hears their lamenting. Hussein is all alone at this time. There is no one he can turn to and ask, "Go in towards the battlefield to help and bring back water." But there is one young martyr who is left to die. There is one young martyr who is yet to give himself for the mission of Hussein ibn Ali. We are told in the books of hadith that when Ibrahim alayhi salam had put the bandage, had put the eye cover around the eyes of Ismail, he had gone to be able to cut his throat. He thought he had cut the throat of his own son. When he lifts that covers his eyes, he sees that his son Ismail is still sitting safe from his blade. The hadith says at this moment Ibrahim begins to cry and cry. Jibreel descends towards him and says, "O Ibrahim, O Khalilullah, tell me, why is it that you cry at this moment? Your son Ismail is safe." He responds and says, "O Jibreel, I had committed myself to giving my son in the way of Allah. I wanted to know what it feels like. I am crying for the gratitude of the safety of Ismail. I had given myself in that moment." Jibreel says to him, "O Ibrahim, this act has been ransomed to a future generation. Do you wish to see someone from your lineage that will have to give his baby son, that will have to give his child, that will have his throat slit from one side to another?" He says, "Yes." Jibreel points towards 2 trees. He says, "Look between those 2 trees." The veils are lifted and he sees in front of him Hussein ibn Ali holding in his arms his 6-month-old baby Asghar with an arrow driven into his neck. "O Ibrahim, this is Hussein from amongst your lineage. This will be the events on the afternoon of the 10th of Muharram." Hussein is standing outside his tents. He calls out, هَلْ مِن نَاصِرٍ يَنْصُرْنَا? Who will come to the aid of Hussein? Who will come to the aid of the grandchildren of Rasulullah? Who will come to those granddaughters of Rasulullah that are crying out from their thirst? Who is going to come? Some of our dhakirin tell us that at that moment the cradle of Asghar began to rock as if to say, Labbayka ya Hussein, Labbayka ya Aba Abdullah. There is still one from amongst your army that is ready to fight on your behalf. But O Asghar, you do not have a sword, you do not have a shield to protect you. How will you go? What will you show them as your sword? What will you show them as your weapon before this devious army? We are told that Zainab brings Asghar towards Hussein and says, this young child has not drunk for 3 days. His mother's milk has gone dry. His eyes are sinking into the back of his head. He no longer can even cry out. He doesn't have the strength to be able to do so. Will you not take this child to see if they will spare him and give him some water? We are told that Hussein calls for a white sheet in order to wrap that around this baby. We will ask why. Because when he takes him out into the afternoon heat of Karbala, it will be the glaring sun that will beam down upon that young child. It may be that he is unable to even survive that amount. What happens when you take this baby out into the open? If Hussein is trying to defend Asghar from the heat, for using that cloth, how will it be that when an arrow hits him, it will defend him from that blade? Hussein takes his child out. As he walks towards the enemies, we are told that the enemies call out and amongst themselves and say, has Hussein come to negotiate with us? Has he come to be able to bring the Quran as a means of negotiation? Hussein opens that cloth and presents before them a 6-month-old baby. He says, O army, if you have thought that I have done something wrong, if you have something against me, then you can do what you want to me. But I ask you, what has this 6-month-old baby done to you? What has this child done wrong? Why do you not allow him to be able to drink whilst the dogs and the pigs drink from the banks of the river Euphrates? Is this not the grandson of Rasulullah? The army, we are told, begin to talk amongst themselves. They say, what have we done? How bad, how are we that we cannot even give a drop of water to the 6-month-old baby? To which now Hussein says, if you think that I will take the water, I will leave this baby here. You can come and feed this baby. I wonder now if it was Ismail and he was able to strike his feet against the floor of Mecca, which was able to bring the Zamzam. I wonder if this 6-month-old baby of Hussein had kicked his feet against the land of Karbala, what amount of water would have come in service of Abdullah al-Radi? At this point, Hussein picks up this child again and again makes this plea. When he makes this plea, we are told that the enemies begin to cry amongst themselves, what have we done? How evil and devious have we become? At this moment, Umar ibn Sa'ad says that he is losing his own army. His own army are the ones that are going to turn against him. He now needs to be able to silence the sign of Hussein ibn Ali. This was that thing that was able to break them. But in a minute, when they were to see that one from amongst them could kill such a baby, they then realized that they could do anything such that they would end up killing Hussein himself. He turns towards Hurmala and he says to him, you are the master archman from my army. If Hussein is allowed to have been given water, then we will not be able to overcome him. Make sure that you silence this sign. We are told that when Harmala is captured, they asked him, what were the different arrows that you struck on the 10th of Muharram? He says in one narration, amongst the arrows that I struck was that arrow that pierced the eye of Abu Fadl Abbas. Amongst the arrows that I struck was an arrow that went into the heart of Hussein ibn Ali. They said, tell us about that arrow. He said that when Hussein was on the floor, Hussein was struggling left and right. There was a moment when his head was split open when they threw a rock to his face. Hussein wiped his own face with his shirt. When his shirt was lifted, I saw his chest was exposed. I walked up to Hussein and point blank range, I took out one arrow that I had been keeping for Hussein that day. They asked, what arrow was this? He says, I had dipped this arrow in poison. Why would you have to dip this arrow in poison? He says, I took this arrow, I put it into my bow. I put it into my bow. I walked up straight towards Hussein ibn Ali, and whilst his chest was uncovered, I fired it into his heart. Hussein had to take the arrow out of his back. That is how far in that arrow went. What was the third arrow that you struck on the 10th of Muharram? They asked him. The third arrow that I struck was the arrow into the 6-month-old baby's neck. What did you do? We are told by our Dhakirin that as he puts this arrow into his bow, he sees the mother of Asghar standing outside the tent. He sees a lady. He has seen a lady waiting for some news about his child. I wonder, was that the mother of Asghar? Or was that Fatima herself saying, oh Harmala, what are you doing to my grandson Asghar? There is a lady standing by the tent waiting to hear of news from her 6-month-old baby. Has the thirst of my baby been quenched? Did they give him water? Nay, they're about to give him an arrow. He puts that arrow in his bow. We are told that that arrow was 3-pronged. What that means is that the tip of that arrow was created in such a way that it had multiple spikes on that one tip. Why did he use this type of 3-pronged arrow? According to historians, there were 2 reasons as to why the Arabs used to use a 3-pronged arrow. Listen to this and imagine what happened to Asghar on that day. The first reason why the Arabs would use a 3-pronged arrow was when they were in a state of war and they wanted to break down a door. They would fire that arrow into a door and yank the arrow out so that it broke open part of the door. Once part of the door was broken, they could then enter in towards the house. The second reason as to why they would use this arrow was when they wanted to slaughter a camel, because the camel's neck is so tough that using an ordinary blade would not be able to kill the camel. Instead, that they would take this 3-pronged arrow and they would fire it against the neck and slice the neck of a camel. I ask you, O Harmala, I ask you, O Umar ibn Sa'ad, how tough is the neck of a camel and how soft is the neck of a 6-month-old baby? Why would you need to use that arrow to pierce the neck of this 6-month-old baby? Silence the sign of Hussein, he is told. He takes this arrow, he puts it into his bow, he pulls it back. In front of him is Hussein. He is holding his 6-month-old baby. He lets go of that arrow. It flies towards Asghar. It strikes Asghar in the neck. It goes so far into the arm of Abu Abdullah. We are told that it strikes Asghar with such force that Asghar's body rocks back and forth. We are told that he flaps his arms like a bird, but we are also told that he looks into the eyes of his father as if to say, Asghar, right now my thirst is being quenched by the Rasul. In a few minutes you will be with me again. Do not cry for me, O Abu Abdullah. When that arrow hits the neck of Asghar, Hussein ibn Ali, it is narrated that he cries out, he takes the blood. One narration says that he wants to throw the blood towards the sky. The sky says to him, O Hussein, this tragedy is too much for us to bear. If we were to take this blood, we swear that we would not rain one drop of water again. Hussein wants to take the blood and drop it to the floor. He is told that, oh Hussein, this tragedy is too much for the earth to bear. If you drop it, we will not grow one thing again. Hussein is forced to drench the blood of Asghar over his own face. He wipes the blood of Asghar on his own beard. At this moment, Hussein carries his baby. He wants to go back towards the tent, but he doesn't know how to face the mother of Asghar. He walks towards the tent saying, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. But he doesn't know how to face her. He turns back towards the enemies. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. How do the enemies face themselves seeing Hussein in this way? 7 times he walks back and forth. Into the 6th time, the narration says that on the 6th time, a voice comes from the sky and addresses Hussein and says, oh Hussein, return back to the tent. There is a mother who is waiting to hear about the news of her child. She is heartbroken. Hussein, go back towards the tent. Hussein goes back towards the tent. We are told at this moment that Sakina comes running out. Sakina cries out, oh father, did they quench the thirst of my... Did they quench his thirst? We are told that Hussein cries out, take Asghar. And the women and children come out and they cry out, Wa Asghara, oh Asghar, what have they done to you? We are told that they begin to bury this little baby child. They bury him inside the tents and place him under the ground. The historians in Dhakirina asked, why is it that Asghar was buried under the ground whilst the rest of the shuhada were kept above in the tents? One Dhakir responds and says, because this was the one head that would not be able to fit upon a spear. They did not want to separated like the rest of the shuhada. So Hussein buries his child underneath. But if they ask you now, where is this 6-month-old baby? Where is he now? We will remember that when Zainul Abidin returned in order to bury the children, to bury the men, to bury the shuhada, we are told that Asghar was buried upon the trampled chest of Hussein ibn Ali. We will ask, why did Zainul Abidin bury Asghar on the chest of Hussein? Because a baby loves to sleep on the chest of his father. Because a baby loves to be able to rest upon the chest of his father. So now Asghar lies resting upon the broken chest of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. ماتم حسين يا حسين.